Hello and welcome to the Varietal Show. My name is Rory and you're watching Varietal Literature's YouTube page. Varietal is a group of writers from Vancouver who like to have fun with narrative, and what we do on the Thursday night show here is we have fun with writing. And the writing we're going to have fun with tonight is an infamous, I was going to say fairy tale, but that's not what it is. It's an infamous fan fiction that was not written by me. It's actually not really clear who wrote it. There was some attempts. There was actual articles by The Verge and other major publications where they tried to figure this out. It's a Harry Potter fan fiction that is infamously bad. Hello, Jenna, and hello, GS. And I'm just going to read you the opening sentence so you guys can get a sense of what we're doing. That's right. Here. Oh, I'm on the wrong section. There we go. Hi, my name is Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway, and I have long ebony black hair. That's how I got my name, with purple streaks and red tips that reaches my mid-back, icy blue eyes like limpid tears, and a lot of people tell me that I look like Amy Lee. And if you don't know who that is, get the hell out of here. Now you might say, well, that sounds like the opening to an email, not a story. Well, we'll get to that. You might also say, who is Amy Lee? And, well, we'll get to that aspect of writing, but just to answer it quickly, it is the singer from Evanescence. Which circles me right around to what are we going to do? I'm going to get right into it. I'm not going to spend any time wasted on this because we got a lot to do. I'm going to talk to you today on litgames, which is our literature games. It's not really a game today, about what people call bad writing. Now, I put in the thumbnail for this, bad fanfic, because obviously that's what's gonna like catch eye. But I gotta be honest, I have a bit of an issue when people come to me and they say, what do you think about this bad writing? I don't really think there is bad writing. I think there is other things you could say about writing that are more descriptive and informative if you're not enjoying it or grasping it. GS says, is she serious? We'll get to that. One thing, so part of what I want to do here today is I do not want to rag on some adolescent teenagers fanfic. What I want to do is I want to discuss about like, why do so many people say it's the worst fanfic ever written? And then try to use some of our skills that we've talked about on the show to rewrite the intro, basically, what is in the story 4 chapters, but which doesn't need to be 4 chapters. And hopefully in doing that, sort of get a better sense of what people are saying when they say writing is bad. And if you feel that your writing is bad, maybe give you some insight rather than just, yeah, it sucks. So if you're just coming here to watch a writer like laugh at some adolescent teenagers fanfic, this ain't your show, man. I'm not here to laugh at other people's work. Now, let's start from the top of what most people are going to say about this. It's called My Immortal. It's very famous in the right circles. Like I said, there's been full-on publications that have articles about it. Let's start with what it is. It is Harry Potter fan fiction that recasts at random characters in a gothic punk world of sort of the early to mid 2000s. Kind of a Hot Topic understanding of gothic. Hot Topic gets specifically name dropped in a few places for sure. And in that, it is also very much about sex. It is an erotica written by someone who I would say pretty clearly is a virgin and doesn't really know what happens beyond making out. other than to simply reference it in a very biological way, which is sweet in its own way. We're not really going to contend too much with that. There is one scene that comes up in the part we'll look at. And I'm going to give you a summary of the whole events of the story, because I actually read all 40 plus chapters of this. I will admit there were a good few chapters I skimmed because there's a lot of filler. But I'm going to talk about the concept because I think it's kind of clever, to be honest. And I think there's something to kind of pull out in a fun way. And now all of that is stuff that might immediately discredit me as a writer, so I'm going to have to defend all those points. Now, the idea of a Harry Potter fanfic that recasts things as gothic, including putting in this character, this female character who is a vampire, though that rarely comes up, it's just a thing. GS says, is she serious? Now that is a debate online, and a lot of people do think this was probably just what they call troll fiction, or trollfic, which means it's somebody who's making fun of this kind of fiction in the Harry Potter fan community, because, you know, fanfic has its own little tropes and you know, not so great writing practices and whatever else. And that it was put out specifically to make fun of those tropes by somebody who was, for lack of a better term, in the know. I don't buy that. After reading through it, I don't think that's the case. For one, it is way too unfocused on any particular form of satire or point for me to believe this was just written out of like spite. For two, if that was your goal, to do a sort of trolly fanfic, there is no reason to have written 45 chapters of it. Now, admittedly, some of these chapters are like half a page, but some are pretty substantial, and it amounts to thousands of words. And I don't think somebody would do that just to troll. And the last reason, which really compels me, is there's a certain kind of sincerity to it that both attracted me to it in the first place when I read it, and kind of speaks to the fact that I don't think it's fake. There's an element to it that's just would be too hard to fake. There'd be no reason to fake that. For example, the very specific fixation on the different fashions that they wear and makeup that they wear is not particularly repetitive either, so it speaks to someone who actually does have a mind full of details for fashion that they like. Like, that's hard to fake if you don't actually care. I think it's real. I think it really was written by somebody in full sincerity. GS says over 40 chapters. Yeah, fanfic does that. Like the Twilight fanfic, 50 Shades of Grey, which was Twilight fanfic, was also that way. Okay, so I'm going to give you the summary of the story. Buckle up, because it's wild. Here we go. Draco Malfoy from Harry Potter, the sort of villain boy from Harry Potter, and Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Wade, who is a vampire, and it will be established in the first place, though eventually becomes consistently called Anobi. And as far as I can tell, there was typos that she posted up, and then there's this sort of subtext that runs throughout the piece from the original printing of people putting really crappy comments below it, and her putting an author's note before each chapter responding to those crappy comments. And one of the things I think was she misspelled Ebony and then tried to sell it that was intentional. So Anobi becomes her name. Fall in love and go to My Chemical Romance concerts. Anobi discovers that Draco is bisexual and had a relationship with Harry Potter, who is gay, looks like the lead singer of Good Charlotte, and goes by the name Vampire now. They have broken up, though. Draco and Harry Potter, or Vampire, have broken up. Many characters, including the lead, are vampires, but this rarely comes up. Anyways, Anobi is cornered by Vlodmort, which was probably, again, a misspelling of Voldemort, but they ride with it. While crying about the revelation that Draco had a tattoo with Harry Vampire Potter's name on it, and in a heart, specifically, thinking Draco was cheating on her. Voldemort tells her to kill Vampire, again, Harry Potter, or he killed Draco. Okay, there's the premise in the first, 10 or so chapters. From this point, dramatic but ultimately inconsequential things happen, including suicide attempts, kidnapping, lots of very questionable sexual politics that I'm going to avoid, and of course, late racism. This culminates in the revelation that they must time travel back in time to seduce Tom Riddle, who the author accidentally calls the Tolkien character Tom Bombadil at first, and then notes it in an author's note after getting roasted for it, because he only became Voldemort due to a broken heart, according to a teacher they invent. So they do that several times and in several ways, traveling back and forth in time. The most amazing being a random cameo that is not expanded upon by Marty McFly's Black Time Machine. I don't know. I'm assuming it's a black DeLorean. Everything's black in this. Eventually, she joins Snape and Tom Riddle's band in the past, then leaves that band. Then the wheels kind of came off, and I honestly didn't really understand a whole lot of after about chapter 32. I know at one point some notable stuff. At one point they torture Lupin to death, but in this continuity, him and Snape are pedophiles, and there's in it they're named that way too. So it's very specific. There's a lot of shooting. They use a lot of bullets, and Anobi dies at one point taking a bullet sexually. Author's words, not mine. Then is alive for several more chapters, and I simply did not follow what happened in those last chapters. I tried. What doesn't help is that there's substantial misspelling, and that makes it harder to read. On top of your normal sort of writing problems. So I'm going to read you the first 4 chapters with that summary out of the way, and then we're going to talk a little bit about writing, and then we're going to try and rewrite those chapters, and we'll see how far we get. As per usual. So this is written by the original author, whoever they may be. Well, buckle up. Just as a note here, there's a lot of swearing in this. In that sort of edgy, I just learned how to swear a grade 9 way. And there is sort of a little bit of sexual content in the part that we're going to read, not a ton. Okay, so anything that says AN is author's notes, and I'm going to read them the first time, but we're going to obviously cut all of that out. So, author's notes. Special fangs. Fangs is how they say thanks. You're going to have to get used to it. There's a lot of slang. Get it, 'cause I'm gothic. Goth, right? To my girlfriend, you not in that way. There is some weird moments of homophobia. Raven, bloody tears 666 for helping me with the story and spelling. You rock. Justin, you're the love of my depressing life. You rock too. MCR rocks. Now, Justin, whoever he is, I'm assuming the boyfriend when she started this, doesn't get noted again. So I don't know. Maybe it didn't last. Hi, my name is Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way, and I have long ebony black hair. That's how I got my name, with purple streaks and red tips that reaches my mid-back and icy blue eyes like limpid tears. And a lot of people tell me that I look like Amy Lee. Author's note. If you don't know who she is, get the hell out of here. I'm not related to Gerard Way, but I wish I was because he is a major effing hottie. Gerard Way is the lead singer to My Chemical Romance. Don't at me if I'm wrong about that, because I don't care. I'm a vampire, but my teeth are straight and white. I have pale white skin. I'm also a witch, and I go to a magic school called Hogwarts in England, where I'm in the 7th year. I'm 17. I'm a goth, in case you couldn't tell, and I wear mostly black. I love Hot Topic, and I buy all my clothes from there. For example, today I was wearing a black corset with matching lace around it and a black leather miniskirt, pink fishnets, and black combat boots. I was wearing black lipstick, white foundation, black eyeliner, and red eyeshadow. I was walking outside Hogwarts. It was snowing and raining, so there was no sun, which I was very happy about. A lot of preps, preppies, people who don't dress like goths. There's a lot of hay made about being preppy in the author's notes. I put up my middle finger at them. "Hey, Ebony," shouted a voice. I looked up. It was Draco Malfoy. "What's up, Draco?" I asked. "Nothing," he said shyly, but then I heard my friends call me in. I had to go away. That's chapter 1. So you get a sense of why there's 40 chapters. Chapter 2. Fangs to Bloody... Author's note. Fangs to Bloody Tears 666 for helping me with the chapter. By the way, preps, stop flaming my story, okay? So I don't know the comments were on this, but you get this secondary look through these author's notes, which become increasingly belligerent about being flamed. The next day I woke up in my bedroom and it was snowing and raining again. I opened the door of my coffin and drank some blood from a bottle I had. My coffin was black ebony and inside it was hot pink velvet with black lace on the ends. I got out of my coffin and took off my giant MCR shirt, which I used for pajamas. Instead, I put on a black leather dress, a pentagram necklace, combat boots, and a black fishnets on. I put on 4 pairs of earrings in my pierced ears and put my hair in a kind of messy bun. So you'll notice that there is a lot of description about... there's a lot of description about... what people wear. Like it was likened to sort of American Psycho. If you've ever seen the movie or read the book, you would get sort of what that means. There's this meticulous description of like appearance and the rituals of vanity. My friend Willow, author's note, Raven disses you. I find that so charming. Woke up then and grinned at me. By the way, Willow never really comes up in this story. Just a random. She flipped her long waist-length raven black hair with pink streaks and opened her forest green eyes. She put on her Marilyn Manson t-shirt with a black mini skirt, I imagine that was originally meant to say, fishnets and pointy high-heeled boots. We put on our makeup, black lipstick, white foundation, and black eyeliner. "Oh my effing god. I saw you talking to Draco Malfoy yesterday," she said excitedly. "Yeah, so?" I said, blushing. "Do you like Draco?" she asked as we went out of the Slytherin common room and into the Great Hall. "No, I so effing don't," I shouted. "Yeah, right," she exclaimed. Just then Draco walked up to me. "Hi," he said. "Hi," I replied flirtily. "Guess what?" he said. "What?" I asked. "Well, Good Charlotte are having a concert in Hogsmeade," he told me. "Oh my effing god," I screamed. "I love GC. They are my favorite band besides MCR." "Well, do you want to go with me?" he asked. I gasped. Chapter 3. I just love the abrupt ends. Author's note. Stop flaming the story, preps, okay? Otherwise, fangs to the gothic people for the good reviews. Fangs, again, Raven. Yeah, by the way, I don't own this or the lyrics to For Good Charlotte. On the night of the concert, I put on my black lace-up boots with high heels. Underneath them were ripped red fishnets. Then I put on the black leather mini dress with all this corset stuff on the back and front. I put on matching fishnets on my arms. I straightened my hair and made it all look all spiky. I felt a little depressed then, so I should mention there's a lot of self-harm in this. I'm not going to read it out. I read a depressing book. While I waited for it to stop bleeding, I listened to some GC. I painted my nails black and put on tons of black eyeliner. Then I put on some black lipstick and I didn't put on foundation because I was pale anyways. I drank some human blood so I was ready to go to the concert. I went outside. Draco was waiting there in front of his flying car. He was wearing a Simple Plan t-shirt. They would play at the show too. Again, a punk band from the early 2000s. Punk. Pop punk. Barely. Baggy black skater pants, black nail polish, and a little eyeliner. Author's note. A lot for cool boys wear. Not a lot. She's trying to say Eyeliner is something cool people wear. I don't know how to pronounce the way it's written. Hi, Draco, I said in a depressed voice. Now that really summarizes it. Hi, Draco with an exclamation mark. I said in a depressed voice. Really summarizes something we're going to talk about later. Hi, Ebony, he said back. We walked to his flying black Mercedes-Benz. The license plate said 666. And flew to the place with the concert. On the way, we listened excitedly to Good Charlotte and Marilyn Manson. We both smoked cigarettes and drugs. When we got there, we both hopped out of the car. We went to the mosh pit at the front of the stage and jumped up and down as we listened to Good Charlotte. And then it's Good Charlotte lyrics. I don't know. You guys can read them if you want. I'm not reading Good Charlotte lyrics. Joel is so effing hot, which is the lead singer of Good Charlotte. I said to Draco, pointing to him while he sung, filling the club with his amazing voice. Suddenly Draco looked sad. What's wrong? I asked as we moshed to the music. Then I caught on. Hey, it's okay. I don't like him better than you, I said. Really? Asked Draco sensitively and put his arm around me all protective. Really, I said. Besides, I don't even know Joel, and he's going out with Hillary effing Duff, which I forgot about, but is delightful to remember. I effing hate that little bitch, I said disgustedly, thinking of her ugly blonde face. The night went on really well, and I had a great time. So did Draco. After the concert, we drank some beers and asked Benji and Joel for those are, Benji, is he MCR or is he also Good Charlotte? Maybe he's Simple Plan. I don't remember, man. I was contemporary to this, by the way. I think the writer of this is probably around the same age as me. We drank some beer and asked Benji and Joel for the blah, blah, blah. We got Good Charlotte concert tees. Draco and I crawled back into the Mercedes-Benz, but Draco didn't go back into Hogwarts. Instead, he drove his car into the Forbidden Forest. Last chapter, which is shorter than the last one. Author's note, I fed up with the flaming, okay, Ebony's name is Inobi now, not Mary Sue, which is something we'll discuss in a minute. Draco is so in love with her that he is acting different. They know each other before, okay? Draco, I shouted, what the F do you think you're doing? Draco didn't answer, but he stopped the flying car and he walked out of it. I walked out of it too, curiously. What the effing hell? I asked angrily. Ebony, he asked. What? I snapped. He leaned in extra close, and I looked into his gothic red eyes. He was wearing color contacts, which revealed so much depressing sorrow and evilness. Then suddenly I didn't feel mad anymore. And then... ... Suddenly, just as I don't know. Draco kissed me passionately. Draco climbed on top of me and we started to make out keenly against a tree. He took off my top and I took off his clothes. I even took off my bra. And then he put his thingy into my you-know-what and we did it for the first time. Oh, I screamed. I was beginning to get an orgasm. We started to kiss everywhere and my pale body became all warm and then, what the hell are you doing, you motherfuckers? It was... so many dots. Dumbledore! Can I just say, I've spent most of the day laughing at the idea of Dumbledore saying that. I'm going to pause there, because I think you get the feel for it. And I don't think you need, literally 30, 40 more chapters of it. Let's see what the chat is saying. Okay. Oh wow, there's a lot here. Okay, Holly South says, sounds like someone wanted those exact things from Hot Topic, but her church mom said no. Yeah, I really get the feeling, because if most fanfic is about sort of fantasy fulfillment for that specific author, I think a lot of this is like, either they didn't have the money or her mom won't let her buy it, so she's sort of living it out in this way. That's why it's so detailed. Holly's House says it's a good thing she clarified they're goths, otherwise I might not have caught that otherwise. Jenna says, I mean, my 10-year-old self can relate to wanting the ridiculous Hot Topic outfits. Of course, yeah. Could see the author finding pictures on Google to curate each outfit. If that was even in, like, when Google had an image search. I don't think it would have been. Early 2000s, I don't think they did. When was it written, Jenna? GS is asking Jenna. It's early 2000s. It's not actually known of who exactly wrote it when. We know it's at least before 2006, 2005, but probably not by much. Oh, Jenna says something interesting. Putting in disclaimers for fanfics about owning things was more of a norm in the early 2000s because of the debacle of Anne Rice suing an interview with a vampire fanfic hosting site. God, authors can be the worst. By the way, what's funny about it is putting in a disclaimer wouldn't mean anything legally. I'm not sure on exact year, GS, but I remember reading it in grade 6 or 7. Okay. Holly South says, I'm just going to say 13-year-old me wrote a follow-up to Carrie 2, The Rage, called Carrie 3, The Reckoning, where I was the child of the character in Carrie 2. My grade 8 crush featured heavily. Yes, exactly. I think we all have stuff like this. If you're like a creative type. GS says you can almost put her age on this. I can't believe you read it already. Look, there were definitely chapters where I started to skim because there became a recognizable cycle, and I just would know every about 10 chapters something would happen interesting with the plot, and the rest of it was this cycle of like Draco being weepy and pursuing Ebony, who's being weepy. Like there was this kind of cycle that would go on, and occasionally vampire, or again Harry Potter, would show up. And I kind of skimmed through a lot of that, partially because it was really hard to read. Which means it's time for us to talk about how we want to fix it. So, the most overwhelming statement that people make about My Immortal is that it's bad. And I've said at the beginning, I don't like the idea that writing is bad. Writing can be very different, but bad seems to speak to the idea that there's a hierarchy of art. And I have never seen anything that really establishes what that looks like. And also, the people who were most interested historically in a hierarchy of art were the literal Nazis. So I'm not too interested in upholding that kind of ideology. I don't think it has much basis in reality, to be honest. It's about what people enjoy. And at the very least, I'm willing to bet the girl who wrote this, I think it's a girl. I don't know for sure. But I think it's a girl based on many, many different clues in it. That the girl who wrote this probably enjoyed it, which is an audience of one, but why not? You know, nobody else was going to write her gothic Harry Potter fanfic, and she enjoyed it. Now, with that said, though, I want to talk very briefly about what makes writing bad in that sense that people are trying to talk about, and therefore have a better idea of how we can sort of fix this opening 4 paragraphs, because I'm going to make the controversial statement that I think this is actually kind of interesting in a bit of a cheesy romance young adult way. But the basic premise here is that we have to go back in time to romance Tom Riddle as a way to stop Voldemort. And I kind of think that's fun in a hokey young adult romance fiction way. I don't think that's as plainly stupid as a lot of people want to make it. I think the delivery could use a lot of improvement. I think there's a ton of characters that could be cut out of this, but I don't think it's all that bad in concept, if I'm being honest. I think the idea of like having a romance with Draco and going to the Forbidden Forest is not really on the surface that stupid. The idea of there being emos in the Harry Potter world frankly makes more sense than the way the Harry Potter world is actually organized, which is around jocks, basically. I mean, Harry Potter and his dad were jocks, and they ran things. I don't think there's a lot that's plainly ridiculous here, but what people are picking up on is most fundamentally what makes writing bad is, can a person read it? Readability is the key here. And I'm going to put out there that if readability is really the measure of the quality of writing, well, then it comes down to who is it for. So I'll give you 2 quick examples of what I mean by that. If you were reading a book written in Chinese, it's not going to be readable to you at all. Even if it was somehow translated to English alphabet and phonetically written, you still wouldn't mean anything to you. In other words, if it's not written in a language you understand, you will find it unreadable, but that doesn't make it bad. It just makes it not for you. On that same point, but in more shades of gray way, I think some of that is going on here. She's using a lot of slang and creative spelling that her friends understand, right? So, she was basically writing it for those people anyways, and they probably said a lot of good things about it and put it up. But we want to make it so that it's a little more widely appealing. So readability is the thing we're going to work with. Readability comes down to how complex the language is, the ordering of the delivery of information, and how it's spelled, and how many little derivations and details it has, and so on. The second thing, which we didn't see too much in that section, although we do see one big example of it, is bad writing doesn't put the story on the page. So if you're a person who wonders why nobody can follow your stories, the most common reason for that, and I'm pulling this, by the way, from a wonderful book written by Betsy Warland called Breathing the Page, which is a book about how to write, written by Betsy Warland, who is a poet who I know and I took classes with, and who is an absolutely lovely person and a very talented poet. But in there, she talks about the idea of asking a question of whether it's on the page. And the most obvious example here was, she says in her author's notes that they knew each other before, her and Draco. And sort of puts it as like, that'll solve the problem as to why they suddenly were getting together. And the problem with that is, at no point in the text of the story does it establish that relationship at all. So we're going to have to do a little work on that. Because if the core of this story is that her and Draco are in a relationship, that's probably the main thing people are showing up to read, and therefore they're going to want to see it on the page. There's other things to ask too, which is, why does a scene exist? But, it's enough to say, I don't actually think the detailed descriptions of getting dressed need to get gone. I think they just need to be tied to meaningful movement in the plot. So, like, if her detailed setup is a character moment, like it is in American Psycho, where we learn something about her in terms of the way she puts it on, even in hokey sort of like 13-year-old ways about how she puts on makeup to cover herself because she worries about the world, I think that still adds a lot of meaning to that whole scene. We can keep those scenes as long as they have a purpose to exist in the narrative. And the final question that matters the most is, depending on who I think my audience is this thing in the story interesting? Give me a second, I need to drink some water here. Now that's a hard question to answer because it's going to vary from person to person. But if you were a 14-year-old who also wanted to wear a lot of clothes to Hot Topic, those Hot Topic scenes might have been pretty interesting. So like, it's a measure of who do you think is going to be reading it. But in terms of is the plot interesting, that rolls us into something that is referenced in the story in response to comments, which is Mary Sue. Now, Mary Sue is actually a critique of fan fiction. We've talked about it on the show before. I'm going to give you a very brief summary. It was it comes from a satirical story that was Star Trek fan fiction written by a woman in the early 70s. She submitted it as satire. It wasn't serious. And it was there. It was a character named Mary Sue who was there to sort of parody a not so great trend in Star Trek fanfiction, which is women would write themselves in as the smartest person who always had the solution to the problems and had no real flaws other than maybe naivete. And to give you an example of like how that can start to manifest, I'm going to give you one of the most classic Mary Sue fanfic tropes in this quote, which comes like in chapter 8 or something. This is said by the protagonist. Yeah, but everyone is in love with me. Like Snape and Lupin took a video of me naked. Just take it as it is and let it slide. We're not going through that part. Hagrid said he's in love with me. Vampire likes me. Again, that's Harry Potter. And now even Snaketail, couldn't figure out who that is, to be honest, is in love with me. I just want to be with you, okay, Draco? Why couldn't Satan have made me less beautiful? I shouted angrily. And then in parentheses, the author's note is, don't worry, Ennaby isn't a snob or anything, but a lot of people have told her she's pretty. And then returning to the character's voice, I'm good at too many things. Why can't I just be normal? It's an effing curse, I shouted, then ran away. Okay, now first of all, that's funny, you know, because it is so revealing that this is a stand-in of an insecure teenager, right? A stand-in character. But that, to me, cuts to the heart of Mary Sue, which is like everybody's interested in this character who can do everything and is the solution to all problems. The first person they talk to can win every fight. I think too much hay, though, is made about Mary Sue meaning overpowered. I don't think that's the core problem with Mary Sue characters. And I also think Mary Sue characters have their place, but I won't talk about that now. The problem with Mary Sue characters to me is because they don't have any internal character flaws, really, that matter, or at least the ones they do, don't create the problems in the story. So for example, you could have a character who is quick to anger. I'm thinking of like Luke Skywalker here. He's sort of, you know, a little bit edgy and quick to anger. But if that doesn't actually create the problems of the story they then have to overcome, or at least doesn't play a role in it, then it doesn't really matter, right? The character themselves is not causing what happens to them. And it's interesting because you might say, well, so what? The thing is if it's not something about the character's choices that creates the narrative, then there isn't really anything interesting about that character being in that narrative. What happens is that character just becomes a thing where bad stuff happens to them. And then they solve it, but it doesn't mean anything to me personally, because just being beat up and then being strong enough to defeat it is an interesting concept for fantasy, for video games, you know, for power fantasy outlets. But it's not interesting in a story. In a story, I want to see complex characters that I can relate to, make mistakes that create the problems they then grow as a person to overcome. And that relates to that idea of, is this interesting? The problem with the Ebony character is she has all this moodiness and she does things like cuts herself and so on. She tries to be very edgy, but none of that informs what happens to her. Nothing causes it. She has no role in the narrative events. Instead, she is simply put upon, whether it's too much attention from people because she's too pretty, or whether it's, you know, Voldemort just shows up in a forest and threatens her. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at what could we do with the character. And then finally, I'm just going to briefly say this, that if at any point you're like, well, I do this, should I not write? First of all, yes, you should write. Second of all, how do you fix your writing? Well, first of all, looking for feedback from people that you trust. And when I say trust, I mean trust to tell you the truth. Not be mean, but be honest. The second is expanding, which we're going to look at in a minute, because I think basically we're going to rewrite maybe a paragraph, and I'm going to show you why that is enough to make several pages. And then finally, never sweat the first draft. Like, if your first drafts look like this, who cares? Honestly, my first drafts have looked about this bad in my life. It's better spelling and so on, but yeah. I also want to show one more thing before we move on here. And there's a specific reason why I want to do this. So that quote I just gave you is a classic, like, I have, is a classic. Sorry, I just realized I gotta set something up here, but that is a classic kind of where did you go? Sorry, guys. This is so weird. It's not showing up. All right. Well, no reason to waste my time on that. If I can't get it going, the that sort of like, I'm so beautiful and whatever, and therefore it's a curse. I want to read for you the exact same problematic writing that we just saw under this Mary Sue thing here. That little quote I read. The same thing in more words, but the exact same trope in a well-selling, extremely popular book. And what I'm going to read you is the introduction of Professor Langdon in the original Da Vinci Code book. It's going to take just a few. I wanted to put the text up, but whatever. So I'm just going to kind of throw you into the middle of it. He is waiting at the side of a stage to go on and give a speech to students at a university. So this is the protagonist of the story. Last month, much to Langdon's embarrassment, Boston Magazine had listed him as one of that city's top 10 most intriguing people, a dubious honor that made him the brunt of endless ribbing by his Harvard colleagues. Tonight, 3,000 miles from his home, the accolade had resurfaced to haunt him at a lecture he had given. Ladies and gentlemen, the hostess had announced to a full house at the American University of Paris's Pavilion Dauphine. Our guest tonight needs no introduction. He's the author of numerous books, blah, blah, blah. Many of you use his textbooks in class. The students in the crowd nodded enthusiastically. I had planned to introduce him tonight by sharing his impressive curriculum vitae. Sorry, I don't know why I stumbled on that. However, she glanced playfully at Langdon, who was seated on stage. An audience member has just handed me a far more, shall we say, intriguing introduction. She held up a copy of Boston Magazine. Langdon cringed. Where the hell did she get that? The hostess began reading choice excerpts from the inane article, and Langdon felt himself sinking lower and lower in his chair. If you think you know where this is going, you might, but it's worse than you think. 30 seconds later, the crowd was grinning and the woman showed no signs of letting up. And Mr. Langdon's refusal to speak publicly about his unusual role in last year's Vatican conclave certainly wins him points on our Intrigo meter. The hostess goaded the crowd. Would you like to hear more? The crowd applauded. Somebody stop her, Langdon pleaded as he dove into the article again. Here we go. I want you to compare this to what a very young girl wrote in her fantasy fiction. This went through editors. Although Professor Langdon might not be considered hunk handsome like some of our younger awardees, this 40-something academic has more than his share of scholarly allure. His captivating presence is punctuated by an unusually low, baritone speaking voice, which his female students describe as chocolate for the ears. The hall erupted in laughter. Langdon forced an awkward smile. He knew what came next, some ridiculous line about Harrison Ford in Harris tweed. And because this evening he'd figured it was finally safe again to wear his Harris tweed and berberine turtleneck, he decided to take action. Now, GS says, funny I can remember that paragraph even though I read it years ago and it struck me as vain then. This was the point I shut the book, by the way. I've never read past this because who cares about a book that starts like that? Holy God. Anyways, what is the functional difference between that introduction and this I'm so beautiful, it's a curse? Like, it's the same thing. And one of them got a multi-movie deal, so maybe we can lay off the 11-year-old writing fanfic. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of things really quick, and we will write a little bit. And I knew this was going to be kind of a chatty stream, so I'm sorry if you guys like our traditional streams where we do more writing. I don't know, I just wanted to try this. I thought it was interesting, and whatever. So, in media res means in the action, roughly speaking. I'm sure it has a more refined translation. And what it refers to is starting a story in the action. Now, is that always necessary? I don't think so. But what it means is basically you want to start as close to interesting events as possible. Now, one thing that every writer does for their entire life is they write a page of backstory nonsense that doesn't need to make it to any final draft. And even if you know that, you will still do it and only recognize it on rereading. Jenna says she's having a good time. Therefore, I've done my job. So in media res in the action means cut that. So let's talk about this opening chapter. Just to remind you, I'm not going to reread it, but just to remind you, it has a character description and it has, of the lead character, it establishes the voice of the character, their interests as a goth, and so on. Now, here's the thing. This whole paragraph, I have written paragraphs like this. I will argue more refined prose with more consistent grammar, yada, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, the same paragraph, which is basically what I guess you could call colorfully getting your feet wet. It's trying to get into the story. But when you go back and edit, this has got to go. You don't need to open on a slog of description like this. You want to open as close to the action as possible in media res. And the action here is Draco, right? Draco's the point. If you picked up this Harry Potter fan fiction about goth stuff, why were you doing that? If not, I mean, if you were doing it sincerely, non-ironically, why would you be doing that if you weren't here to imagine you were in a relationship with Draco? So that, to me, is the action. We need to start into that action. So right off the bat, let's get rid of that. I'm going to full on delete the author's notes. Because your story is where you tell people the story. You don't get another shot at it. So, and who was her friend again? Or was her friend here? She said friends were here. So Willow is her friend, right? That she wrote into this. We're going to use Willow. I don't really know any of Willow's traits because obviously she threw her friend in there and then felt like, why do I have to describe her? She knows. Okay, so Willow raised an eyebrow. Let's load it a little bit more. Raised her pierced eyebrow. And nudged me. To look at Draco walking up the path. So right there, we've established that it's in first person. I have a friend named Willow. They have a pierced eyebrow, and obviously I've noted that, so that's going to matter. That's our, like, trying to capture that gothic tone eventually, indicating it as early as possible. In a bleak mood, as always. I suppose other girls might have had an issue. Might have found that off-putting. Again, I'm not trying to write literature here. I'm just trying to improve this story. But I wasn't other girls. I was a vampire. And that made it hard to be friends, to make friends in the ritzy private school that was Hogwarts. Okay, so is at any point in this story, is it established that this person has a hard time making friends at Hogwarts? Not really, but I'm trying to make it more interesting. Jenna says this is already leagues better. Yeah, and again, like, if you tuned in to see if, like, I was going to make fine literature about this, no, that's not my goal, because that's not who the audience is. I'm trying to see what the best version of this person's story is. Well, some people took issue with muggles. Or sorry, half muggles. With muggle parents. And others thought it fine. No one but Draco thought a vampire could be a witch. I never had to justify myself on that to him. Well, whispered Willow. Or let's say Willow whispered. Are you just gonna gape? Are you gonna get your butt over there? Oh, I said, he doesn't really see me as anything but a friend. Okay, so let's talk about what we're doing here. We're establishing where she is, and we're establishing a kind of conflict with her surroundings because, well, I don't think it's on the page in any of those 45 chapters. What does sit at the subtext is that she is in conflict with her preppy environment, and I gotta be honest, she has a point. Like, if you're gonna write a gothic Harry Potter story, I mentioned at the beginning, the Harry Potter is such a, like, preppy universe, and so proud of that. Like, it's weird, you know, and they try to say, like, well, Slytherin are people too, but, you know, they're just presented as villains, even though they're kind of just darker spirits, right? Some of them are straight up villains. Now, the other thing that you see happening here is we're establishing early on a solid relationship between her and Willow so that there is a chance for more dialogue and somebody to sort of play the action forward, and she can keep her timid spirit, because I think that's a part of the, I mean, I'm not a girl, but I think that's a part of the young girl fantasy of like, oh, little old me. Like, I think there has to be somebody that pushes there. And then we see her insecurity. Doesn't really see me as anything but a friend. Feels self-conscious about being a vampire, which I take to be sort of a metaphor about just being different. And so on. Going to get your butt over there. Now, I mentioned that I wanted to keep the meticulous descriptions of what was the appearance. But I wanted to, if you guys remember, somehow tag it to the character development or the story development. And I think I know how to do that. Oh, please. Willow said, eyeing me up and down. You didn't dress. And what was her description here? I'm just gonna cut this and put it up there. And then sort of piece it out as a piece of conversation. You didn't dress in your best. Go away. I don't want to link. Stop. Whatever. And your best goth kit. So yeah, I'm done with the kids. And that little black corset. If you weren't trying to turn some heads. I shoved her and told her that was ridiculous. She had a point, though. When I woke up in my Slytherin dorm and crawled out of my coffin, a custom order that took some pleading to get Dumbledore to let in. I did set to work on a fine routine of makeup. This wasn't anything like the other girls, though. I could always tell my kit, my bathroom set, from theirs. They had shades of pink, purple, and other blushing colors. to be so alluring, like big pink flowers. For dumb old jocks. Dumb jocks. But mine were the colors of death. And vampiric delight. Sorry. I know I'm kind of ignoring you guys. This is taking a lot of focus because I'm not a young girl who likes makeup. I had black lipstick, though occasionally that's the terrible spelling of that. I thought, why did I respell that and then spell it wrong again? Though occasionally a ruby red one. A deathly pale foundation. That's smeared on heavy. A rich black eyeliner. And a red eyeshadow that licked up towards my brow like an ember of hell. It took time to do this. I had to wake up early and get it right. It would be a lie if I said in all those strokes of makeup, strokes of paint across my real face, I never once thought of Draco Malfoy. Still, Willow couldn't know that. And I played dumb. Draco was wealthy, handsome, and confident. He didn't need the attentions of an outsider vampire witch. It's probably a bit long for a paragraph. There's probably a break in there. Willow plucked at my pink fishnets. That rode high under my leather miniskirt. And made a suggestive expression. before saying, oh, and didn't Draco say he liked these last week? Shut up, I said in a hissing whisper. I just like them too. It's obviously why I bought them. Okay, now I want to sort of establish what I would call you know, I don't really have a name for it. Do I need a name for it? The sort of core premise of it, of like the action or the decisions the character makes, which is like, how does this conflict of who she is, how is this going to play into? I'll remind you, because you've probably forgotten, the core plot of this is that she has to travel back in time and romance Tom Riddle to stop Voldemort, which I refuse to let go because that is a great concept. Jenna says very kindly, no, this is great. It's interesting to see how you'd rewrite it while keeping the bones. Yeah, so the bones, I guess, what am I trying to say here? I mean, we're an hour and 10 minutes in, so we're already going long. What I'm trying to say here is, I think that sometimes people are mean about creative processes where the artist lacks craft, which is a thing you can gain with experience, but isn't really that bad. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, as a person who has read some pretty good writers' work, but in early drafts, it's not that removed. Like, it's definitely, they got the spelling and the weirdness, and we don't put parentheses in, but at its bones, it's not really in worse shape than a lot of stuff I've read. There's a lot of stuff I've read from people who end up making good books, but they have these rambling sections, and I'm talking about myself here too, where you go back and you go, this isn't interesting, why am I doing this? And a lot of fan fiction, and I also get this, is writing something, being excited about it, and dumping it into the world. Because you're like, this is great. And that is like first day romance. You need to go to sleep, wake up the next morning and reread it. You will see problems, right? Don't throw it out to the world in first draft, right? GS says, this is so weird because I've been watching Depop bundle videos. Don't know what any of those words mean together. I know what they mean individually. Well, I don't know what Depop is. And they're all full of this Hot Topic fashion look. I mean, it was a big look. I mean, it's like kind of a timeless thing. If you're an outsider, this is the look you go for. Okay, so on that idea, she needs to make some sort of strong statement here or effect, which is, I guess some girls just aren't built for this stuff, you know? Like, I don't even know what I'd do if I got a date with him. I'd probably just screw it up. I don't know what I'm doing. And I never will. I said, stood, gonna do a reference to Nancy Drew here, turning on my heel. It's like 9 times a page in Nancy Drew. They turn on their heel. And hustled away from Willow and the approaching Draco. So I'm setting up this world because I think this is often, I'm sort of reading into the author a bit here, but I'm setting up this world of like, because you've been put down and othered for who you are, in this case a vampire in a witch school, I'm putting down this conflict that it has created this decision-making matrix for the character where if they don't know how to do something, they never will, and trying doesn't matter. Because I think that could be interesting. For this kind of story anyways. For her to overcome, and for her to create her own problems by simply assuming she can't do it. Willow told me later that Draco had some tickets. What was it, to My Chemical Romance? Can we do something more Harry Pottery? Like a pun on that. My magical no, see, that doesn't work at all. It rhymes the same, but it doesn't capture that spirit. My Alchemical Romance. I'm doing it. You can't stop me. My Alchemical Romance. A wizard emo band he knew we liked. She said he wanted us to go if we were cool with it. I couldn't believe it. And I told her to stop lying. Then she showed me the tickets. I thought about that moment so long when Draco would want to see me outside of school. But now that it was there, in front of me, I couldn't handle it. I just burst into tears. I didn't know why. And I was so embarrassed. I locked myself in the bathroom and used Moaning Myrtle to cover my sobs. Okay, I'm not going to write more than this. Because it is literally a quarter after an hour, and normally I try to wrap this up in an hour, and I'm sure a lot of people are about done with watching me rewrite this. I had optimistically set that 4-chapter goal because I wasn't sure exactly the best way to approach this really up till the moment I was doing it. And because I really like that, I do feel like getting caught by Dumbledore is a kind of inciting incident. I felt like there was a way that was the first real concrete action consequence to a decision that occurred in the story. So I think that's an interesting thing to sort of write towards as your first big hook. However, I I would like to show that basically what we've done here is we have breathed into the page. We have expanded a lot. And we've taken what was about a half a page and turned it into 3 pages. Gias says, I think the author of this fanfic should thank Rory in the comments for treating her efforts with respect. I mean, she's probably in her late 30s at this point, and never ever wants to be associated with it because people put literal death threats on it, which, good lord, people, get a hold of yourself. Someone writes something that you don't like and you just are that intense about it. What have you ever done? Like, I obviously didn't really enjoy a lot of it. I enjoyed it more than I thought I would, but there was a lot of filler and repetitive stuff, but it was kind of what I expected. I thought it had some kind of bonkers off the wall ideas that could work as long as you framed them up right and built to them. I'm still totally sold on the idea of having to romance through time and having, which is something I didn't mention, but in the story, having kind of hints of this love triangle between her going into the past to Tom Riddle and Draco feeling jealous about that because he knows that she has to romance him, but he's like, how far is it going? Like, I thought that's interesting, right? Is it like gonna win a Giller prize? No, man. Like, but it wasn't trying to. It's trying to entertain 14-year-old goth girls that liked Harry Potter. So I did actually think its title as the worst fan fiction was a bit unfounded. A lot of it really just came down to a person who didn't spell very well and talked a little bit trendy. So I don't know, taking that out, I think the bones aren't that bad. All right. So that means we need to read back what we have. So what do? We are trying to sort of fix My Immortal, this infamous piece of fan fiction, which I don't actually think is as bad as a lot of people make it, and I made the case for that throughout. But I did want to talk about like what makes writing bad, and so we talked about that the number one thing writing has to be is readable. It has to be as easy as possible for the audience to read. However, I also talked about the fact that readability is very subjective, and so it's going to come down to your audience. You know, if you speak a different language than the book, it's not readable at all, but it's not necessarily poorly written. And I would argue some of the supposedly great books are basically unreadable. James Joyce, I'm looking at you. What the hell? So it really just depends on your audience, right? But I think readability is kind of king. We talked a little bit about some other things I won't retread here. We talked about the definition of Mary Sue. I sort of pointed out that the main problem is with a Mary Sue character is the world happens to them, as opposed to their own character creates problems, therefore growing as a character solves problems in the story and plot. And that makes them unconnected to the plot, other than being bullied by their world, and therefore not very compelling or personal. The journey isn't very compelling and personal. And I think that's the core problem with Mary Sue. If those aren't problems, though, if those aren't things that your story needs, then a Mary Sue character is fine. I know. But there is occasions where Mary Sue characters are fine. Luke Skywalker is pretty close to Mary Sue, and it's fine. He works well for the context he's in. Link from Legend of Zelda is totally Mary Sue. I guess it depends on the game, but most of them. The only thing I really want to highlight again with the fix your writing is never sweat the first draft. First drafts are terrible. And they're meant to be. You just need to get them done, get them down. You can't do anything, can't build anything out of clay until you have the clay on the table. And so then what we did was we took this first little chapter from My Immortal, this infamous fanfic, and we sort of started making adjustments. Some of them required assumptions on my part upon reading all the chapters of this story to try and bring out what I think worked and cut out what I think didn't, and sort of recontextualize some of the things that interested the author in a way that made it more interesting and relevant to the story. So let's see what we came up with. Willow raised her pierced eyebrow and nudged me to look at Draco walking up the path, in a bleak mood as always. I suppose other girls might have found that off-putting, but I wasn't like other girls. I was a vampire, and that made it hard to make friends in the ritzy private school that was Hogwarts. While some people took issue with Muggle parents and others thought it fine, no one but Draco thought a vampire could be a witch. I never had to justify myself on that to him. Well, Willow whispered, are you just gonna gape, or are you gonna get your butt over there? Oh, I said, he doesn't really see me as anything but a friend. Oh, please, Willow said, eyeing me up and down. You didn't dress it up in your best goth kit and that little black corset if you weren't trying to turn some heads. I shoved her and told her that was ridiculous. She had a point, though. When I woke in my Slytherin dorm and crawled out of my coffin, a custom order that took some pleading to get Dumbledore to let in, I did set to work on a fine routine of makeup. This wasn't anything like the other girls, though. I could always tell my bathroom set from their sets. Why did I spell it that way? They had shades of pink and purple and other blushing colors to be so alluring, like big pink flowers for dumb jocks, but mine were the colors of death and vampiric delight. I had black lipstick, though occasionally a ruby red one. I meant to write more than that, to cover the blood on my teeth. A deathly pale foundation that smeared on heavy, a rich black eyeliner, and red eyeshadow that licked up towards my brow like an ember of hell. It took time to do this. I had to wake up early and get it right. It would be a lie if I said in all those strokes of paint across my real face, I never once thought of Draco Malfoy. Still, Willow couldn't know that, and I played dumb. Draco was wealthy, handsome, and confident. He didn't need the attentions of an outsider vampire witch. Willow plucked at my pink fishnets that rode high under my leather miniskirt and made a suggestive expression before saying, "Oh, and didn't Draco say he liked these last week?" "Shut up," I said in a hissing whisper. "I just like them too. That's obviously why I bought them. I guess some girls..." Oh, why did I separate this? I guess some girls just aren't built for this stuff, you know? Like, I don't even know what I'd do if I got a date with him. I'd probably just screw it up. I don't know what I'm doing, and I never will, I said, and stood turning on my heel and hustled away from Willow and the approaching Draco. Willow told me later that Draco had some tickets to My Alchemical Romance, a wizard emo band he knew we liked. She said he wanted us to go if we were cool with it. I couldn't believe it, and I told her to stop lying, and she showed the tickets. I had thought about that moment so long, when Draco would finally want to see me. It's not well written. Outside of the school. But now that it was here, in front of me, I couldn't handle it. I just burst into tears. Wow, the wheel really came off here. I don't know why, and I was so embarrassed I locked myself in the bathroom. Using Moaning Myrtle to cover my sobs. And if you don't know Moaning Myrtle, she's from Harry Potter universe. All right. Well, that was a bit of a long one, but thank you for those who stuck it out. And yeah, I mean, basically, I just... I guess what it comes down to is I've always been a little annoyed at the idea of bad writing being an obvious thing. I don't really believe there's bad writing. I just think there is topics people don't care about in general, and therefore it's more idiosyncratic. And I also think that there is maybe execution problems that make it harder for an audience to read. And if most of the people can't read it very well, then it needs some adjustment, right? And then finally, I think the most consistent problem people have is they don't put their story on the page. They are in their head, they put some parts out, and they believe that they have said stuff that just isn't on the page. And if you ever have somebody say like, I didn't get that at all, I want you to ask yourself this question. And again, this comes from Betsy Warland's book. I want you to point for yourself what sentence on the page told the reader that. I guarantee you won't be able to find it. And I think that's a lot of what was happening with this story. And so what I basically wanted to do was expand on those moments, let them breathe more, and show these characters and their relationships, because ultimately, what's a romance story about if not the relationships? So don't beat up people for trying to create things. My God. It was some girl just working through stuff. And I got to be honest, after reading 45 pages of it, the most or 45 chapters of it rather, the most interesting thing about it is the subtext, the like meta text of the whole thing, of like the author's notes revealing what she was sort of, how she was responding to these mean comments, and the themes that come up, which I'm not going to delve into here, kind of speak to her working through some things, some pretty serious things. So I feel like lay off. It's not that bad. And with that said, I will be back here with some fairy tales next Tuesday at 6:30. If you like the video, give it a like. Other than that, I gotta go pack up the store, cash out. You can go where you want, but you can't stay here. Get out of my store.